Micah Brown, what's going on, buddy?
Yes, sir. Just another day in paradise with a three-nager
Oh, a
and
three nate. Oh,
who
dude.
doesn't want to do anything
Yes,
that you want her
yes.
to do.
How many do you have?
We had a conversation. How many three-nagers do I have?
Yeah, how
Thank
many
God I only have
teenagers you have?
one
You only have one
right
teenager.
now. Yeah, I
You have
don't
two.
have
You have
twins,
two
and
kids, right?
I do have two children, as I call them, the furless children. But Lily is 9 months old, and Charlotte is a three-nager. She is 3.5, going on 15.
Oh,
Um,
fantastic
and
names.
we just had a very. This is why I had told you I was trying to slam some food, because prior to that, I was convincing her that eating her food was in her best interest, because we do like a marble system, and she needed one more marble to get Chick-fil-A and ice cream. So I was like, Charlotte, if you would just obey, I don't want to eat my food. I'm like, but listen to what I'm saying.
Yeah, Daddy's got
So
to go.
anyway,
He needs to talk to Mr. David. Yeah. All right.
yeah,
So the
exactly.
reason why I want to talk to you today is because I've been having a blast interviewing folks lately, and I wanted to reach out to folks that are up and coming, folks that are trying to make
Sure.
this thing happen, whatever this thing is, right? I've
Hmm.
also interviewed some been there, done that, some folks that have been in the game for 20, 30 years. In my opinion, you're an up and coming. You're trying your
Cool.
hand at this podcast thing.
Life.
And
No.
yeah, in life too. Yeah, we're all trying. That never goes away, just so you know. Speaking of that, I do have a couple years on you. How old are you right now?
My birthday was last Saturday. Turned 31.
31. Okay, so I'm 38. So I met you when you were 9 years old. When I was 16 and I just moved to Texas. Your sister is a year older than me, 8 years older than you. And so I was hanging out with your sister, and I remember you on the couch playing video games all the time when I'd come over and hang out with your
I
family and
don't
hang out
doubt
with your
it.
sister. Yeah. So yeah, dude, you were gaming it up all the time when you were 8. But anyways, let's move past 8 years old and get to up to what you're doing now.
I mean, those were my
So
prime years. What are you talking
I
about?
know, dude. Hey, look, frankly, right now, I wish I could get back to a phase in life where I sat on the couch and played video games all day.
Responsibilities were about this big,
Bro, dude, yeah, I'm like, hey, where are the Cheetos?
Yep.
But right now, you're trying your hand at something interesting, and I think I've talked to so many people that have said, I want to do a podcast, or I want to do this, or I want to do that, and they never really pull the trigger on it. And you're smiling already, and I know why you're smiling.
I've gotten the messages. Yeah.
Yeah,
So,
because
and I'm
you
not
have,
even that far in, and already I've had probably 6 people reach out and be like, "What equipment do you use? How do you host a site or
oh yeah,
whatever?"
yeah,
And
yeah,
like,
yeah.
speak the language to me.
Yeah, and
Yep.
this is the thing. You're not talking about it. You're doing it. And that's why I want to talk
Yep.
to you, is because you pulled the trigger. You're like, I'm going for this. Let's go. You even have
Yep.
a partner in crime. We'll get into that here in a little bit. But okay,
More ways
so
than one.
yeah,
Yep.
yeah, yeah. So let's talk about, you're not 8 anymore. So give us the fast
No.
forward from 8 until now.
Okay. So 8 years old, I was living in Austin, grew up in Austin.
Yep.
We moved when I was 11 down to ultimately New Braunfels to help start a church. Finished out high school there, and then went off to this amazing university. It's a small school called Texas A&M University, and took me 2 years to get in there. Learned how not to procrastinate, but um, because it took me some time to get into A&M and get my first degree, I actually stuck around and got my master's in education, which then ultimately led to obviously me teaching. So moved back to Austin because I love Austin, despite the whole Longhorn thing. And I taught for 5 years, 4.5 really. Met my wife during that time. Actually met her at church
Cool.
when we were both dating other people, but then obviously we broke up with the other person. Um, we got married. She actually then became a teacher after we had started like dating and then got engaged. She got her teaching certificate and she taught for 3 years. The where the transitions all start to like fall into place, which this is just for fun. Elizabeth and I started dating, and within 2 weeks I said, hey, unless you cheat on me, I'm going to marry you. And her response was, I know. I
She's
was
like,
like,
I
I don't think
gotcha,
that's the way that's supposed to let me try this again. And I literally said it
bro.
all again. She goes, yeah, you're the first person that's mentioned marriage, and it hasn't made me want to crawl into a dark hole. And I was like,
Yo,
okay, so I count that as a positive.
look, that's got to be the baby of the family thing, because I pulled that one on my wife too. Like straight up, was like, we're gonna get married, and she's like, I've known you for like 2 weeks, dude. No, we'd known each other for longer than that, but it was we've been dating for 2 weeks and that. But anyways,
Yeah,
Let's put
same.
that on
We've been
pause because we could talk about the relationship thing forever, dude.
Oh, for
Um,
sure. Yeah.
so y'all, you're quick to pull the trigger like
We
me, right?
Yep. Got engaged in 3 months, married 6 months after that, pregnant within our first year of marriage. Like, so we got married
Dude,
in June.
why have we
By
not? How have we
January of,
not talked about this before? We
I
were
don't know.
dating, engaged, and
We
married
need to do
within
more
10 months.
videos.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Seriously.
So
Um, my wife
on
and
our
I were
next
dating.
episode, no.
Yeah, that's exactly. No, see, here's the deal. I know who my audience is. They will get bored to death if we continue down this path. Actually, some of them like it a lot, the whole marriage and kid stuff. But
Yeah.
so you and I both have the same story: dating, engaged, and married within about 10 months. Is that about right?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's exact. So that's exactly what happened to me too. Anyways,
Yep.
go ahead. What
So
were you
yeah,
saying?
we'll fast forward. She taught for 3 years, and then when we had Charlotte, uh, she got tired of watching the nanny or whatever the daycare person, um, sending videos and text of what our kid is doing, and she was like, I don't like missing out on this stuff. She had a marketing background, a marketing degree, and she wanted to stay at home and kind of do her own business. So I was teaching, she was marketing, and the one company that she had kind of foot in the bill cut her loose with no warning whatsoever. So surviving off a single teacher salary is really tough. In case you didn't know,
And who was
I
the
ended up
single teacher?
having
You were the single teacher
me.
salary.
Yeah, I was
You were
teaching.
teaching at that time, yeah?
Yeah, and Leander, teaching two preps. That means two subjects in teacher speak, and that was leaving teaching for the sake of my family. Even still, was the hardest decision I've made. I have not cried that much outside of when we had our miscarriages. So to put it on par with like how painful that was for me because I love my kids. So from there, I wanted to do something where I could still I'd look backwards and seen, and this will tie into why the podcast in the first place, but I look back and I saw what's the common thread between everything that I enjoy doing, and that was having a positive impact in people's lives. When I was a personal trainer, I could have a positive impact. When I was a camp counselor at Pine Cove, I could have a positive impact. Even as a server, bringing people food. If you don't think food doesn't make people happy, you haven't spent time around human beings. But all of those different things, even to being a teacher, having a positive impact is what I enjoyed. I would frequently tell my students, I wish we could just hang out and talk about life and not have to worry about, the TEKS, the standards and testing and everything. So when I realized teaching was not going to cover the budget, um, I looked into other professions where I actually tried to get a secondary job, started up a landscaping company. It didn't take off as fast as I wanted it to. And so I actually went into financial planning. Some of you are like, now hold on, time out. You went from teaching middle school to finance. And I like to joke and say that really I was teaching adults, and if you get down to it, some of you are going to argue when you watch this. I dare you. Adults are the exact same as middle schoolers. We just have better masks, and if you get us drunk or on vacation or both, they look exactly the same in how they behave. So, and I am saying that even as an adult. So I was, in my mind, I was teaching adults about finance and helping them understand something that's super stressful.
Yeah.
Well, then again, family stuff started coming up again. Both of my daughter Lily, who's now 9 months old, but when she was 3 months old, she was in the hospital for a week and a half. Had 4 different respiratory viruses, and then got bacterial pneumonia after the hospital. Um, she's happy as can be. Her name literally means pure joy, and so we had that happen. Well, about the same time, we didn't notice it because of everything with Lily. Charlotte started having health issues. Then, while we were in the hospital with Lily, Elizabeth got the job at Facebook where she now works. So when things started happening with the doctor's appointments and everything going on with that, I had to become the one, because she's not going to take time. You don't take time off right when you start a job. It's not
Yeah,
like,
dude.
oh,
You
thanks
go.
for the job offer.
Yeah,
I'm out for a whole
You're
month.
Mr. Mom all of a sudden. Yeah, you're Mr.
Yep.
Mom for
And
sure. Yep.
so I personally have the conviction that your family and your relationship, me in my particular situation, my relationship with my wife is the foundation for everything else within our home, and then it's kind of spreads outward from there. So I wanted to support her by then supporting my kids, and so I was taking them to doctor's appointments, I was taking them to the specialist appointments, getting an MRI done for Charlotte, even getting tested for leukemia, like some pretty serious heavy stuff. And ultimately I realized I'm not doing my clients any favors by not being as present as I can for them. So for about 2 months time, I put together a plan to like exit out and hand off my clients to people that I trust personally as advisors.
See,
So
that's a man right there. I don't care what anybody says.
I
That's
appreciate
that
it.
you're making real decisions at that point. You're not just saying, yeah, I'm gonna let life control what I do. You're saying, no, I have to
No.
foundationally secure what's going on.
Yeah, and
Um,
this it's other people's lives, right? It's not like you're just talking about, I don't know, buying a car or something. You're literally discussing people's livelihood
mhm.
and how they'll even live out their retirement, planning for their kids. So I took that very seriously, but I also knew that me exiting was ultimately what was going to be best all
For
around.
your family, yeah, absolutely.
So around that same time is where the podcast comes in. I've been talking to some people about, how I was feeling, people that I really trusted, and I was like, man, I love being involved in people's lives and really watching their life benefit from something I might have thought was just ordinary. And I just say, here's what I did, or here's what I thought. And it's not like a point of arrogance. It's just, I love helping people. And so I open my mouth and then come to find out something I did actually could help that person. And ultimately, it led to people in a period of a week. I had 4 people say, have you thought about starting a podcast? Which is
So
weird.
let's
Okay.
pause there for just a second, because here's the thing, man. Like your topics, you've already done it on this conversation so far. You're bringing up some heavy topics. You're talking
It's
about,
life.
yeah, like, but
Yeah.
but most people aren't willing to talk about these things. Most
No.
people want what's exciting, what's new, what's popping. And it's funny because I'm doing that right now. Like I'm interviewing you and talking with you because I want to see what you're up to, this new thing that you're doing. But as I'm interviewing you, I'm seeing you go, I want to talk about the real stuff about life. You use the word
Yeah.
within the first 5 or 10 minutes. You said, virus, you said miscarriage, you said job loss, you said, things where you have to make hard decisions for your family. These aren't light topics, right? And so
Yeah.
this rolled over into you starting a podcast because people are going, I want to hear somebody talk about these things that I'm struggling with too.
Hmm.
So real quick, what are some of the topics, or real slow, take your time. What are some of the topics that y'all have chose to talk about on your podcast?
So the first one that we talked about, the first topic, we ultimately it was talking about little disciplines lead to big wins, which seems to be a frequent thing. But the way we went about it was we compared landscaping, exercising, and parenting, which at face value is kind of like, I don't understand how parenting and landscaping are the same at all. But a lot of people tend to get overwhelmed with the details, the discipline that it takes to have a healthy yard and a good looking yard, the details that it takes and discipline it takes to have a healthy body. A lot of people come January are like, yep, this is the year, I'm doing it. And then by the end of February, if that, they're like, yeah, it's too much work. And so what we walked through was these are the same in that if you boil it down, you just have to be disciplined in this one area of time management or this one area of how you plan things out. From there, it then translates into relationships, into family life, into how
Bro.
I'm interacting with my friends,
Yep.
how I'm interacting with my job. So we got to the bottom layer of it all by comparing 3 seemingly unconnected things. From there, we went into a marriage series, and the common thread through all 4 episodes of that was just communication, making sure that you have the right words to communicate with your friend, your boss, your
Oh
partner,
my
your
gosh, yeah.
spouse. So that a big thing, just to kind of touch on just a slightly deeper than just the superficial layer here. We talked about just batteries, which is one of the episodes that we've gotten the best feedback with, because I I said, when you like, everybody has 4 different types of energy, and if you think that's some like hyper spiritual speak, just pause. Think of all the ways that you're tired. You could be physically tired, you could be mentally tired, you could be emotionally tired, and then even spiritually tired. So those are your 4 batteries.
Yeah.
If you recognize that, then you're then able to communicate that. And if you can communicate that, then you can build deeper and better relationships. Ultimately, you can create this bubble and this ripple effect around you that, because you're just knowing yourself better, you can then communicate it to other people and make other people hopefully better with you. So that's the ultimate goal of the whole podcast. Even this next episode we're going to do is actually going to be Elizabeth and myself talking about our miscarriage experience, talking about how we went through that, because we saw, even just from sharing it on Facebook, months later, people have reached out to us. Actually, so it's been over a year since we had that miscarriage now. And um, we actually, yeah, over a year since we had the miscarriage. And just 2 weeks ago, I had somebody call me and say, literally call me and say, hey, we just had a miscarriage. I know y'all experienced that. What do we even do? So literally, by just us being willing to talk about it, somebody else is getting healing from it. So that's ultimately what the whole purpose is.
All right,
I hope
so
that answers your
yeah,
question.
Micah,
Probably makes more.
I'm gonna throw our notes right out the window right now. So we can I'm gonna go ahead and close these because we're talking about something else. Um, for you to be that vulnerable in a somewhat live setting, a recorded live session,
Mhm.
um, what does that feel like to be that vulnerable and put it out there for everybody to hear?
I have to delineate now versus the first time,
Sure, sure.
Um, the first time, for those that, and I'm not going to go into a lot of detail with this, but growing up, I was bullied and picked on a lot. And I would try to talk to people about things that are happening. And the response was always, shut it down. You're annoying. Don't talk to me, that kind of thing. When I got into college, I started to see that multiple people are dealing with the same thing and none of them are talking about it. So that encouraged me to open up. So the first time that I kind of started talking about difficult things, and it depends on the setting, right? And obviously, podcasts very public. Some people are like, oh,
Yeah.
that's kind of a weird setting. But how else are we going to talk about? So the first time I stepped out, it was nerve wracking because you don't know how you're going to be received. For those of you watching this right now, if you're in a business setting and your superior says, does anybody have any questions? And in your mind, you're like, only like 17 questions, but I'm not about to raise my hand because I don't want to be that guy right now we already ran over on time. I don't want it to run another 30 minutes. Am I right? So I'm the guy that's like, okay, we're all thinking the same thing here and no one is just raising it. I'll raise my hand.
Okay, so dude, you're my favorite person in class because I do this for a living. I am a corporate. I work for one of the world's largest companies, and I am a corporate facilitator. And I volunteer it this way. I say, somebody ask me a dumb question, a bona fide, you should know this answer. Give me a dumb question. And sure enough, man, so I have a dumb question. I'm like, great, let's have it, because I'll show you mercy if you promise to ask me a really dumb question that's on your mind. And and this is the thing, it opens up the room, and it gets
Yep.
it airs it out, so everybody who was, like you said, thinking of
Right.
this question that didn't have the guts to ask it.
Yeah.
I tell people all the time, there is such thing as stupid questions. There's a lot of stupid questions,
Yeah. Be
but
a teacher. Yeah.
I go, I will show you mercy. There's my caveat, right? It's like, you ask me as many stupid
Yeah.
questions as you want. I will show you as much mercy as I can handle. And I have a lot of it for people that have questions they just don't understand. But you're bringing up topics, and I think by you just putting a highlight on some of these deeper topics, some of these life struggles that people are having, you're allowing people to have mercy on themselves by
Mm.
saying, I'm not alone. And you're also showing them mercy by saying, hey, you're not alone, right?
Yeah. I mean, cut yourself some slack, right?
Yeah.
I So to kind of put the other end of it, like, it's not our first time now talking about these deep conversations,
Topics. Yeah.
topics. Yeah. Um, Now we have started to receive the responses and the input of literally someone saying, You've helped my marriage become better just because you talked about blank. You have helped me understand myself better because you've talked about blank." And I think the difference is, and it's even like you keep saying, you talk about these heavy topics. The purpose is to have casual conversation about big topics in a way that it's not this weighty, oh my gosh, it's life sucking, and it actually takes more energy to talk about it than to just go through it. Instead, it's no, just make it a common. You need to talk about this with somebody in a way that's just casual. Like, yeah, I've struggled with depression. I never thought about suicide, but I have dealt with depression for a period of 3 years, and I got around it. I had to find ways to overcome that, and here's what I did. And people are just baffled, like, wait, you deal with you're an extrovert. Like, how are you dealing with depression? Well, newsflash, welcome to my family.
Yeah.
Newsflash, usually extroverts deal with depression. Like, it's the people who you think who look like they have it all together that are dealing with it. So to me, I'm just, let's have a casual conversation about it. It doesn't have to be some big, scary, deep, weighty topic that sucks the life out of you whenever you bring it up. It should actually be life-giving.
Yeah. And I think when those topics come up and they come to the surface, people are able to pinpoint where they started or where it
Mm-hmm.
stems, what it stems from. And
Yep.
man, I could talk forever about the 4 batteries thing that y'all brought up, because I mean, depression comes in all sadness, depression, I mean, whatever title you want to give it, comes in all different forms.
Mm-hmm.
And if you talk about what battery is depleted the most, and it will most likely tell you where that depression's coming from.
Sure.
And I mean, if you have a rough childhood, I don't know, I don't know how, if that's appropriate way to put it, a rough childhood, and it causes you depression in your adult years, or if you're currently going through a struggle, whether it be, like you said, physically, spiritually, emotionally, any of those batteries, then it can cause sadness or depression in those areas. And but if you know what category it's in, you have a better chance of highlighting it and saying, hey, you know what, I need to change a few things over here and get me out of this funk that I'm in. And we're
Sure.
we're obviously not talking about people with chemical abnormalities. We're talking about people that are,
Right.
and it could be a chemical
In a funk.
abnormality too. Yeah, in a
Yeah.
funk or in a deep depression that's has a cause and a root outside of a chemical structure in the body.
Sure.
Um, but anyways, I'll stop there
I,
because we don't want to get too far into
well,
diagnosing all
I was
these
just gonna
issues.
say, like, if anybody's worried about, no, I don't want to spend the time trying to figure this out right now. Like, I don't have time for it. Why do you go to a doctor? Why do you go to a car mechanic? Like, why spend the time if you're sick with something? Like, why even bother going to the doctor? You'll figure it out later, right?
Yeah,
But you want to figure out what's wrong. You want to figure out why your side has been hurting. You want to figure out why you're getting headaches constantly. So, in the same way, why don't we do that with things that are bothering us internally?
yeah, yeah, absolutely. So you set out on this little adventure and you took action. And this is what's so funny, is because I think a lot of people come to me and said, I want to start a podcast, and it's for the sake of starting a podcast. I actually would accuse you of actually having a platform and then saying, oh, the podcast is the way we should do this, rather than I just want to start a podcast for the sake of starting a podcast. And
Mhm.
I can only assume this is why the podcast is getting up off the ground so fast, is not because you're doing a podcast for the sake of a podcast. You're, you have a topic and an agenda,
Mhm.
things that should be addressed and that are not being addressed by other people that you feel need to be addressed, and you're just
Yep.
using the podcast as the medium for conveying that information. Does that sound pretty accurate?
Yeah, absolutely. The thing that Ben and I talked about originally was we want to promote conversation.
Yeah,
So you can think of all the different ways you could do that, right? I could walk next door to my neighbor and be like, "Hey, Shay, let's chat real quick," that sort of thing. But we wanted to do so in a way that allows us ultimately to all to people that aren't just my next door neighbor, that aren't just living even in Texas. We have people in France, like regular listeners that have been listening. I don't know if I guess they speak English if they're listening to it
sure they
regularly,
do.
but
Yep.
but the whole point was to promote conversation that I feel like is not being had enough. So yeah, the podcast is where we decided to do that medium, and we have social media and stuff like that that all points back to the podcast to say, like, here's where the conversation is happening. And so yeah, that's really where it stems from.
So when it comes to collaborating, because this is I'm real big on collaborating, right? This is exactly why I want to talk to you today, is because like I have an
We
audience. I'm not.
we are right now. Yeah.
Yeah, we're doing it right now, right? So this, I have an audience, and I felt like you'd be incredibly valuable for the audience that I have. And I I'm always curious to see what your collaboration strategy, or just your, I don't want to call it a strategy, it gets too businessy, but you know what I mean.
It is
What,
what it is.
yeah, it is what it is. Like what are you hoping to, where is your biggest impact going to come from? Like, who are you are you hoping to connect with counselors and psychologists on the back end of this that can get people help? Or are you said you're there to promote conversation, and
Mhm.
are you hoping that the listener of your podcast will ultimately go talk to a friend and family member? How are you hoping to collaborate? How are you hoping this unfolds on a, afterthought, on a, after the podcast ends, I guess, that
So
specific podcast?
I think I understand your question. Kind of what's the long term ripple effect is
Yeah,
how I
there
kind of
you go.
interpret
Ripple
that.
effect. Yep.
It's multifaceted, just like people. And I would love to get to a point where we have specialists who, a counselor, a sociologist, a psychologist, things like that, that can be on the episode where we interview them and say, like, what are some things that you see people are dealing with that they're not talking about, blah, blah, blah. But then in addition to that, I told Ben this before we ever recorded our first episode. I said, I want to get to a point where we are interviewing people who are either celebrities of some sort, business people that are very successful, whatever that may be, people that we elevate in our minds, but then have a conversation with them where we go, wait, what? Like Matthew McConaughey dealt with this and that, or John Krasinski, who's doing some good news. He was bullied as a kid. I don't know if he was, but I'm just saying, like, he was bullied as a kid. What?
Yeah.
Why hasn't anybody ever talked about this? And I want that to be the thing, so that then people who feel much more comfortable listening to a podcast in their car or working out or whatever, then see and hear and are kind of a fly on the wall for those conversations, that then they can go, oh, this actually isn't that big. Okay, now I'm going to go talk to a counselor, because turns out all these other people are talking to counselors. Why don't I go talk to a counselor? They then get help. Or you don't have to necessarily go to a counselor. Maybe you just need to open up to your wife, your husband, your girlfriend, boyfriend about something, just to
Yeah.
get it out and not have it rotting internally. That's what we would love to see. Ultimately, the kind of label I put on all of that is we want to create a better society just from promoting conversation, directed conversation.
Well, and here's what I'm seeing from this and what I've heard from your podcast. I mean, the topics can be very heavy, very deep, but what
Mm-hmm.
it ends up doing is lightening everything up to the,
Yeah.
like, if you talk about this stuff, if you get it out in the open, your heart's just a little bit lighter.
Yep.
Your thoughts are just a little bit clearer. And
For sure.
this is the thing that I love the most about this, is when everything's said and done, um, we're not bringing these things up to leave people in a state of depression or in a funk or sad, or
No.
in a place
Mm-mm.
where they're like, okay, well, now I've addressed it, now it's consuming me. No, it's like, now I've addressed it, now I feel a little bit lighter, I feel a little bit better, right? That sort of thing. And so
Yep.
that's what I've seen from it, or heard from it so far from the podcast, and I think it's fantastic. We're getting close to our time here. I try and keep these under 30 minutes.
Sure.
So what is the name of the podcast?
Micah and Ben podcast. We like to
Micah
keep it
and Ben
super simple.
podcast. Yeah,
Yeah.
that's awesome. As long as they
Which,
can remember who those two guys are, we're good to go, right? Micah
right.
and Ben
Yeah.
podcast. Yeah.
For anybody that does want to start a podcast, that'll probably want to be one of the more difficult things you have to come up with, because we had like 20 other names before we finally were just like,
Oh,
screw it, let's just do our
dude.
names.
Okay, so me and my brother both. My brother's in marketing, and I've had 11 different companies now. And finding a name is one of the most interesting things ever. And if you
Yep.
suck at it and you just trudge ahead, then you make your mistakes and you figure it out later. But if you're actually trying to get it right the first time, dude, it is hard to get that right, because
Yep.
there's so many different facets to that. So anyway.
Yep.
So you started a podcast. Again, we're coming up to the end here. Dude, I feel like I could talk to you for like the next 5 hours. We
How
literally
sweet.
brought up, I know. Yeah. Dude, I'm like, I was struggling so bad. I'm like, oh my God, what are we going to talk about? Because there's like 100 different directions I can go here.
Sure.
But absolutely love the stuff we touched on. Again, totally running out of time here. I need
Mhm.
5 more hours with you, but um, you started the podcast, you named it. You bought the equipment. You're doing it out of your house,
Hmm.
and I mean, you're making it happen. So I applaud you for that for sure.
Thanks, man.
Um, how many sessions? Like, how often do you do the podcast? What's the goal?
We aim for one a week.
One a week, so you get new
Yep.
content every week. That's
Hmm.
clutch, man. That's what I'm shooting for with these videos too. I get no money and no endorsements or anything from interviewing the folks I'm interviewing, but my goal is having an interview a week. And there's an endless supply of interesting people in Austin. So my hope is to interview some folks that are up and coming, or the ones that have been there, done that. And much like yourself, I'm sure you will have an audience. If you interview the right people and talk about the right subjects, you're going to get uh, the the goal you set out to achieve for sure. I have no doubt about that. So,
Appreciate it.
anyways, with that, any last comments or suggestions or um, places to go, links to click on? Yeah, no, yeah, I got that little Freudian slip. Where's the edit button?
Licks to clink on. Okay,
Licks to
sure.
clink on.
And I'll see you later.
And we're off.
um,
No, yeah.
some encouragement to people out there who are trying to start things. It's one thing to say, like, I play drums. And if I remember right, you play guitar at least, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So people say they want to play something. People say they want to start a podcast. What they don't mean is that they want to practice the drums. They want to spend the hours and get the blisters on your fingers from playing, whether it's your fingertips or the middle of your finger, from practicing over and over and over. They just want it to appear like Matrix style. You plug in and then you can play. Life is the exact same way. So
Yep.
figure out what you do have a passion for, and then be disciplined in your approach. Have a system, have a structure. I literally have calendar reminders every weekday of when I should be posting to social media, which then means I need to go record a video or need to have that article set up. But in the same way, my personal life is the exact same. I know that every week there are 3 nights that I'm spending with my wife that are carved out specifically for her. And one of them is date night. One of them is intentional time. We don't really
Dude,
do anything special, and it's just intentional. Turn the
so
phones off.
many topics, because you just went from like discipline and self-control to like healthy marriages. I'm telling you, dude,
But
I
it's
seriously could talk to you like
there's
for
a
the next
common
5 hours.
thread.
I'm like,
Yeah.
dude,
But
stop baiting me into a conversation.
just
Um,
reel it in. Yeah. No,
no,
but the
look,
common encouragement is just be disciplined in your life. And it doesn't matter what the topic is, it doesn't matter what the situation is. There are common things that you can put in place, common systems that you can put in place that can be applicable to a variety of situations.
yeah, I always say you will succeed or fail based on the strength of your systems. I could care less what somebody's goals are. Goals take care of themselves when your
True.
systems are strong. And you said it. You said if you have a system in place, your systems will dictate whether you succeed or fail, period. Because
Yep.
systems can be changed, manipulated, and adjusted. Goals are just something off out in the ether that you hope you get to one day. But you
Hmm.
will succeed or fail based on the strength of your system.
Yep.
And I think for now you got a great system. And I'm looking
I
forward to
appreciate
more
it.
podcasts coming out, man.
Thanks, man.
All right.
Appreciate it.
Talk to you soon.
Take care.